I was 24 when I realized how quiet a relationship could become without actually ending. Lucas and I had been together for almost 2 years, long enough to settle into routines that felt safe but also strangely hollow. We still texted good morning, still shared meals when our schedules allowed, still slept side by side. Yet somewhere along the way, the warmth between us had softened into something polite, almost careful, as if we were both afraid to disturb what remained. Lucas wasn't cruel or neglectful. If anything, he was dependable to a fault. He worked long hours at a design firm, often coming home mentally exhausted, his affection expressed through actions rather than words. He fixed things around the apartment, remembered to buy my favorite cereal, kissed my forehead before bed. But conversations had grown shorter, laughter less frequent. When I spoke about my worries or hopes, he listened, nodded, and offered solutions instead of understanding. I told myself that was just how love matured. Ryan noticed the change before I admitted it to myself. Ryan had been my friend since college, the kind of person who remembered small details and checked in without being asked. He was 25, openly charming without trying, and had a way of making people feel seen in crowded rooms. When he invited me to his birthday party, he did it with the ease of someone who assumed my presence mattered. "You're coming, right?" Ryan asked over the phone. "It won't be the same if you're not there." Lucas was supposed to come with me, but on the afternoon of the party, he called to say he was staying late at work. His voice carried genuine regret, yet I felt an unexpected flicker of relief. "You should still go," Lucas said. "Have fun for both of us." That should have reassured me. Instead, it highlighted how often we now lived parallel lives. Ryan's apartment was already alive when I arrived. Music hummed through the walls, laughter spilling from the balcony, the air thick with warmth and familiarity. Friends greeted me with hugs and raised glasses. Someone pressed a drink into my hand before I had time to think. I told myself one night of distraction wouldn't hurt. Ryan found me near the kitchen, smiling wide when he saw me. "I'm glad you made it," he said, and for a moment, his attention felt like a spotlight. He asked about Lucas, about work, about how I'd been feeling lately. Not just what I'd been doing, but how I was holding up. The difference was subtle, yet it landed heavily in my chest. I drank more than I intended. Not enough to lose control, but enough to let my guard loosen. The conversations grew easier, the laughter louder. Still, beneath it all, there was an awareness I couldn't shake, a sense that I was leaning into something I'd been missing. As the night wore on, people began to leave in small groups, offering sleepy goodbyes and promises to text. By the time the apartment quieted, it was well past midnight. My head felt light, my thoughts pleasantly blurred around the edges. Ryan noticed me rubbing my temples. "You okay?" he asked. "Just tired," I admitted. "I might have overdone it." He hesitated, then nodded toward the couch. "You can stay here if you want. No pressure. I'd rather you didn't try to get home like this." It was a reasonable offer. Ryan lived across town, and Lucas was already asleep by now. I texted him anyway, letting him know I'd stay over at Ryan's place. He replied with a thumbs up and a heart. Simple, easy. As Ryan handed me a glass of water, our fingers brushed. It was nothing, barely a moment, yet I felt it linger longer than it should have. I told myself it was the alcohol, the late hour, the comfort of familiarity. I reminded myself that Ryan was just a friend, and that Lucas was waiting for me at home. Still, as I settled onto the couch and listened to the quiet hum of the apartment, a question crept in uninvited. When had being seen started to feel like temptation? I closed my eyes, unaware that this night, which had begun so harmlessly, was already shifting the ground beneath my feet. I woke sometime after midnight to the muted clink of glass in the kitchen. The apartment was dim, the party's energy reduced to a faint echo that lingered in the walls. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. Then I remembered the couch beneath me, the soft blanket Ryan had draped over my shoulders, and the choice I'd made to stay. Ryan stood at the counter, rinsing glasses with deliberate care, as if the quiet demanded precision. When he noticed I was awake, he smiled, lowering his voice. "Sorry if I woke you. Want some water?" I nodded, sitting up slowly. My head felt clearer now, the pleasant fog lifting just enough to leave behind a sharper awareness. Ryan handed me the glass and sat on the opposite end of the couch, leaving space between us. It was a small gesture, but I noticed it. He was careful, or maybe I was projecting restraint where I needed it most. We talked again, softer this time. Without the music and crowd, our words carried more weight. Ryan asked about Lucas in a way that felt curious rather than intrusive. I answered honestly, admitting things I hadn't said out loud before. How Lucas and I still cared, but spoke past each other. How I missed being surprised by affection. Ryan listened without interrupting. When I finished, he nodded once. That kind of quiet can be heavy, he said. Especially when you're the only one hearing it. His understanding unsettled me. I shifted, tucking my feet beneath me. I don't think anything's wrong with us, I added quickly, as if defending an argument no one had made. I didn't say there was, Ryan replied gently. Just that you don't sound happy. The honesty of that statement pressed against me. I took another sip of water to give myself time. Ryan wasn't accusing, wasn't suggesting. He was simply reflecting something I'd been avoiding. That made it harder to dismiss. The conversation drifted to lighter things, college memories, mutual friends, plans we'd abandoned and jokes we'd repeated too often. Laughter returned, easy and familiar. At some point, Ryan leaned back, his arm resting along the back of the couch. It wasn't touching me, but the nearness changed the air between us. I became acutely aware of details I'd never lingered on before, the steadiness of Ryan's voice, the way his eyes softened when he smiled, how he waited for me to finish speaking before responding. None of it was new, yet tonight it felt different, sharpened by proximity and the late hour. You can take the bed, Ryan offered suddenly. I'll sleep out here. I shook my head. It's fine. Really, I'm okay on the couch. He studied me for a second longer than necessary, then nodded. All right, just wanted to offer. When he stood to turn off the remaining lights, the room fell into shadow, lit only by the city glow filtering through the window. The quiet returned, deeper now. I lay back, staring at the ceiling, listening to Ryan move around the apartment before settling into the bedroom. I should have slept. Instead, my thoughts spiraled. I replayed the evening, the ease of the conversations, the way I'd felt more open than I had in months. Guilt crept in, not because I'd done anything wrong, but because I'd enjoyed the feeling too much. After a while, I heard Ryan's door open. He paused in the hallway, hesitating. Ethan, he called softly. Yeah, I can't sleep, he admitted. Mind if I sit for a bit? I told myself there was nothing wrong with company. He sat at the edge of the couch, careful again to keep space between us. We didn't speak right away. The silence felt charged, as if words might tip something fragile. Ryan exhaled slowly. I don't want this to be weird, he said. I like talking to you. I like talking to you too, I replied, and the truth of it surprised me with its force. Our eyes met, and neither of us looked away. In that moment, I understood that something had shifted, not outwardly, not in a way anyone else could see, but internally. A boundary I'd always assumed was solid now felt thinner, more flexible than I wanted to admit. Ryan stood abruptly. We should sleep, he said, voice steady but tight. I nodded, grateful for the pause. As he returned to his room, I lay back down, heart racing for reasons I couldn't fully explain. Nothing had happened, yet the night no longer felt harmless. I closed my eyes, knowing that whatever I'd felt sitting beside Ryan would not disappear by morning. Sleep never truly came. I drifted in and out of shallow rest, my mind alert to every sound in the apartment. The hum of traffic outside, the faint creak of the floorboards, the awareness that Ryan was just a few steps away behind a closed door. Each detail anchored me to the moment I was trying to escape. At some point, I heard him again. Not the door this time, but movement, soft, uncertain. Then his voice, quieter than before. Ethan. I opened my eyes, already awake. Yeah. Ryan stood in the doorway, the hall light outlining his figure. He looked hesitant, like someone standing at the edge of a conversation he wasn't sure he should start. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't mean to keep you up earlier. You didn't, I replied, sitting up. I wasn't really sleeping anyway. He nodded, stepping into the living room. This time, he didn't sit at the far edge of the couch. He chose the chair across from me instead, close enough that the space between us felt intentional. The distance was a decision, and we both knew it. For a while, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't empty, it was crowded with thoughts we hadn't named. I felt an urge to fill it, to say something safe and inconsequential, but the words refused to come. Ryan broke first. I keep thinking about what you said, he admitted. About feeling unheard. I swallowed. I didn't mean to put that on you. I know, he said. I care about you. And sometimes caring makes it hard to pretend you don't notice things. There it was. Not a confession, not a line crossed, but an acknowledgement that stripped away the last of my deniability. I leaned back against the couch, suddenly aware of how exposed I felt. I love Lucas, I said, as much to remind myself as to inform Ryan. I know you do, Ryan replied without hesitation. This isn't about that. The calm certainty in his voice unsettled me. It would have been easier if he'd argued, if he'd challenged my loyalty outright. Instead, he left room for complexity, and that made the situation harder to navigate. We talked again, more carefully now. About timing, about how people could be right and still misaligned. Ryan spoke about his own relationships, about being drawn to people who were emotionally unavailable because it felt familiar. I listened, recognizing uncomfortable parallels. At some point, our conversation slowed. Words became unnecessary, replaced by glances that lingered too long. I noticed how close his chair had shifted, how the space between us had narrowed without either of us moving deliberately. Ryan looked at me then, really looked, and something in his expression changed. Not desire, exactly, but recognition. As if he saw me not as someone's boyfriend or his longtime friend, but simply as Ethan. This is dangerous, I said quietly. Yes, Ryan agreed. He didn't move away. My heart pounded, each beat echoing the same warning. I thought of Lucas asleep in our bed, trusting me without question. I thought of the life we'd built, imperfect but real. And I thought of how seen I felt in this moment, how rare that sensation had become. Ryan reached out, stopping short of touching me. His hand hovered between us, suspended in a choice neither of us wanted to make. We don't have to do anything, he said. I just need you to know that what you're feeling isn't imagined. That was the moment something inside me fractured. Not because of what he did, but because of what I allowed myself to feel. Relief, warmth, longing, all rushing in at once. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. Ryan withdrew his hand slowly, as if resisting gravity. He stood up, breathing out a shaky laugh. I should go back to bed, he said. Before we say something we can't take back. I agreed, too quickly. He paused at the doorway, turning back one last time. Our eyes met, and in that shared look was an understanding that neither of us would forget this night, no matter how carefully we pretended otherwise. After he left, I sank back into the couch, staring at the darkened ceiling. Nothing irreversible had happened. No lines had been visibly crossed. And yet, I knew with painful clarity that I had already betrayed something important. The realization settled heavy in my chest as I finally closed my eyes, aware that morning would bring consequences I wasn't ready to face. Morning arrived without ceremony. Pale light slipped through the blinds, outlining the living room in soft gray shapes. I woke with a dull ache behind my eyes and a heavier weight in my chest, the kind that didn't fade with rest. For a few seconds, I lay still, hoping the night would recede into something unreal. It didn't. The apartment was quiet. Ryan's door was closed, the handle catching the light. I sat up, folding the blanket with unnecessary care, as if order might restore something I'd unsettled. My phone buzzed in my hand before I checked it, the screen lighting up with a message from Lucas. Morning. Hope you slept okay. The simplicity of it stung. I typed a reply, erased it, typed again. Yeah, heading home soon. A neutral truth, stripped of context. I sent it and stared at the screen until it dimmed. Ryan emerged from his room a moment later, already dressed, hair still damp from the shower. He paused when he saw me, an expression crossing his face that mirrored my own mix of restraint and regret. Hey, he said quietly. Hey. We stood there, neither of us moving closer. In daylight, the charged stillness of the night felt exposed, almost fragile. Ryan gestured toward the kitchen. Coffee. I nodded. We moved around each other with careful choreography, avoiding touch without making a show of it. The coffee machine hissed and gurgled, filling the silence with something practical. Ryan handed me a mug, our fingers not quite meeting this time. I'm glad you're okay, he said, eyes fixed on the counter. About last night, I don't want you to feel uncomfortable. I don't, I replied, then hesitated. I just don't know what I feel. Ryan looked up then, meeting my gaze. There was no expectation in his eyes, only concern. Whatever it is, he said, you don't owe me anything. I meant what I said. I care about you, that's all. His words were a relief and a complication all at once. I thanked him, Because it felt necessary, and because anything more would have been a step too far. Within minutes, I was gathering my things, the urgency to leave growing with every second I stayed. At the door, Ryan stopped me. "Ethan," he said, and waited until I looked at him. "Take care of yourself." "I will," I said, hoping it was true. The walk home felt longer than usual. The city was waking up, shops opening, buses rumbling past, people moving with purpose. I felt disconnected from it all, as if I were observing a life I wasn't fully participating in. With each step, the question I'd been avoiding pressed closer: what did last night mean if nothing had happened? Yet everything felt changed. Lucas was in the kitchen when I arrived, wearing an old sweatshirt, pouring cereal into a bowl. He smiled when he saw me, an easy, familiar expression that tightened my throat. "Hey," he said, "you're back early." "Couldn't sleep much," I replied, setting my bag down. He nodded, accepting the explanation without probing. That trust, so casually given, made the guilt sharpen. We ate together in companionable quiet, the rhythm of domestic life resuming as if uninterrupted. Lucas talked about his plans for the day, a minor complaint about work, a joke he'd heard. I listened, responding at the right moments, acutely aware of how normal everything appeared. After breakfast, Lucas reached for my hand. "You okay?" he asked. "You seem distant." The question landed softly, but it landed. I met his eyes and saw concern there, not accusation. For a moment, I considered telling him everything, not the details, but the truth of my confusion. The urge to confess rose and fell, leaving me suspended between honesty and self-preservation. "I'm just tired," I said finally. "Long night." Lucas squeezed my hand. "Get some rest tonight. We'll catch up properly." As he left for work, I stood alone in the apartment we shared, the quiet echoing differently than it had the night before. I replayed the small choices that had led me here, accepting the drink, staying late, choosing not to leave when I should have. None of them seemed catastrophic on their own. Together, they formed something harder to dismiss. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, Ryan's contact glowing on the screen before I locked it again. There were paths branching out in front of me now, conversations to be had, boundaries to be rebuilt or redrawn. The certainty I'd relied on was gone, replaced by a fragile awareness of how easily things could shift. That night hadn't ended with a clear mistake, but it had opened a door I couldn't unsee. And as I lay back, staring at the ceiling, I understood that the real consequences weren't behind me, they were waiting, shaped by whatever I chose to do next.